One of the things we need to take into consideration is the question, what is off-road? By its very definition, once you leave the blacktop, you're travelling off-road. But there are quite a number of interpretations. For some, the term off-road may mean travelling down a gravel road to a lovely campsite in a national park. For others, it may mean traversing the old telegraph track at Cape York. What you need to ensure is that your vehicle and your trailer are set up correctly for the type of terrain that you consider to be off-road. When it comes to setting up your vehicle for off-road travel, there are a number of options that you may want to fit either in or onto your vehicle. You may consider fitting a bull bar. The purpose of the bull bar is to give you some frontal protection in case of an animal strike. It also gives you somewhere to mount your driving lights or possibly even mount your winch. Moving further down the vehicle, tyre selection becomes critical the further we want to go off-road. Highway tyres are going to do the job very nicely on the blacktop, but we will find their limits very quickly in off-road conditions. You may want to consider an all-terrain tyre, which is going to boost your off-road capability. It'll also increase your puncture resistance as well. Perhaps you might want to use a mud terrain tyre. This will give you increased capability off-road, but it will come at the cost of on-road performance. Travelling through Australia means that you are at some stage going to be travelling on a dusty outback road. To protect your engine, you may consider fitting a raised air intake. What this does is it allows the engine to draw clean, fresh air in those dusty conditions. If part of your travel means that you're travelling with a group of friends in a convoy, you may want to make sure that you've got good separation between vehicles so that that raised air intake can draw that clean, fresh air. The further afield you travel, the more you're going to have to rely on good communications. We fit a good brand of UHF radio that allows us to communicate with other members of our convoy if we're travelling with a convoy. If we're travelling on our own, it allows us to communicate with the odd farmer who may be ploughing their paddock. The other form of communication that we will normally carry is a satellite phone, because our normal phone is not going to work everywhere. The satellite phone gives us a greater breadth of capability in more remote areas. When it comes to towing off-road, there are a number of other things to consider as well. Things like your towing hitch. Does that hitch have enough articulation for all types of off-road conditions? Other things to consider is fitting a good quality stone guard. This serves to protect the front of the trailer when you're towing off-road. It also serves to deflect stones coming off the back of the vehicle so that they don't bounce back into the window of the car. You also need to look at the underbody protection of the trailer itself. You need to make sure that the electrical leads, the water pipes and any of the discharge pipes are well protected and shielded. You will also want to consider where your spare tyre is mounted. Is it mounted on the rear? Is it mounted underneath? Is it easy to get to in an off-road situation? As with all things, travelling outback means that you want to have a fantastic holiday, a good journey, make it nice and safe for yourself. Good preparation is the key to making that happen.
There are only two things that will stop a vehicle and a trailer on a track, and they are traction and ground clearance. So if you're bogged, it's going to be one of those two things. So the first thing you should do is to get out of your vehicle and track down the problem. Have you run out of ground clearance? Have you hit a rock or something on the track that is jammed up in front of one of your wheels and that's stopping your progress? It could be something as simple as that, and then you'll be on your way in no time. But other times you could do your inspection and you might find that it is simply a traction issue. And in that case, you always want to get out of things as easy as possible. So I'd really recommend getting back into your vehicle and having a good think about what has gone wrong. If it's traction, you might want to lower the tyre pressures on your vehicle, but not just your vehicle, your trailer as well. That's really important because that actually improves the tread pattern length of your vehicle. It spreads it out over a far larger area, so your vehicle is far less likely to dig holes. It's far more likely to grab that traction on the track so that you can drive on through. But it might also be the setup of your vehicle as well. Have you got all of your traction aids activated? This vehicle here, it's got a rear differential lock. Now, that changes the traction options so much in your vehicle. It will become essentially a tractor. When you lock in that rear differential lock, you can drive your vehicle forwards or backwards. And obviously backwards is a great way to go when you've got a trailer on the back. If you can get out of trouble and then reassess the track, lower your tire pressures, and then drive forward, that could well be the easiest way to go. There are a host of other electronic options in modern four-wheel drives that can really help you out when you're off-road, but some of them can also be a hindrance in a boggy situation. For example, your stability control in this vehicle can be turned off for precisely those times when you get into a bog. But there's another button here called the off-road button, which does wonderful things off-road. It will change your traction control so that it works far better in a boggy situation. It will also change your throttle input and your brake input as well. So it really is an advantage to know your vehicle and specifically what it needs to do in that boggy situation.
Now we've determined that we can't drive either forwards or backwards out of our bog, so now it's time to look at one of these things, and this is called a snatch strap or a snatch'em strap. Now these are pretty cool because they stretch around 20% of their length, and that means that they store quite a bit of kinetic energy if you attach them to another vehicle, so they can essentially pop you out of that bog. But they are very misused, and we're going to show you the correct way of using them so you can avoid any pain or any damage. So let's look at what you need for a snatch recovery. Obviously you need another vehicle there to tow you out, and it's preferable that that vehicle is the same size or even larger than the one that you're pulling out. You also want to make sure that your recovery points are going to be up to the load that you're pulling out. Using something like the pin through a tow hitch is usually a-okay, but likewise the recovery point on the vehicle needs to be able to handle that load as well. When it comes to connecting those vehicles, if you do need to use a shackle, you want to make sure that it is a rated shackle, not a regular hardware store shackle. You want to make sure that it actually is stamped with what's called a working load limit, and that will tell you just how much weight you can pull with that shackle. Anything else, and it could turn into a lethal projectile. When it comes to the snatch strap itself, they are rated at different weights. Generally, they'll be 6 ton, 8 ton, or even 12 ton. And the key here is that you want to match them up with the weight of your vehicle. They obviously need to have a minimum braking strain that is more than your vehicle and your trailer. But just keep in mind, you don't want to have overkill, because if, for example, you've got a vehicle that weighs 6 ton with a 12 ton strap, that strap won't actually stretch, so it won't do you any good at all. And finally, I'd recommend using cable dampeners at both attachment points. You see, these things do have a tendency to break and age over time, and mostly they'll actually go at the stitching, which is near the eye. So what that cable dampener does, if the snatch strap breaks, then it keeps everything nice and low to the ground and out of harm's way. Speaking of harm's way, you don't want anyone anywhere near the recovery area, just in case something goes wrong. Keep people either in vehicles or well away. Now that you've attached the strap to the vehicles, you want to make sure that there's at most 1.5 meters of slack between those vehicles. And now it comes down to the driving. Firstly, you want to make sure that you've got very clear lines of communications, be they signals or UHF-CB radio, between both of those vehicles, so that you can really time that recovery right. Now there are some myths out there that you need to absolutely gun it in a snatch recovery. You don't, and in fact that first snatch should be really nice and slow. It's nothing more than as if you're taking off at the lights and you can presume that you've got no one behind you. Simply take off with normal throttle and you'll find that 99% of the time that will get this vehicle out of trouble. Now a snatch recovery is fine if you've got a friend, but if you are traveling alone, then these will come in mighty handy. These are called recovery tracks, and they're designed to actually sit underneath the tread of your vehicle to give it a good, firm, very grippy surface so that you can drive up and out of your bog. So essentially we're solving two problems. We're solving the ground clearance problem and we're solving the traction problem at the same time. So how do they work? Well, the first thing that you want to do with these tracks is to actually get in under your vehicle and dig out the offending matter. Could be sand, could be mud, could be snow, could be just about anything under there. And the beauty of these Tread Pros is the fact that they are scalloped at the ends, and they've also got essentially good handles on them as well, so you can simply grip and dig that sand or mud or snow or whatever it might be out from underneath your vehicle. Now on the other side, they've got these wonderful raised lugs, and particularly in a muddy situation, they're really fantastic at really working with the grip on your tyres and also cleaning the tread a little bit. Now, what I like about these ones is that those raised lugs are actually made out of a pretty robust material. Some other cheaper ones and more expensive ones actually do melt if you get any sort of tyre slip on these. Now, you don't really want to spin your wheels up on these things, but it does happen in a slippery situation. Now, if I'm going out of my four-wheel drive with no trailer, then one of these pairs will do just fine. But whenever I've got a trailer, I always consider that additional, essentially dead weight on the back of your vehicle, and that is when you want all the traction and all the ground clearance that you can get. So I will always take out two pairs whenever I'm towing. That way I can put these under all four corners of my four-wheel drive, those driving wheels, and I've found that I've had much more success by doing that. When you're putting the Tread Pros in place, you've got to make sure that they are hard up against the tyre. Don't leave even a couple of centimetres between it, because they simply won't work as effectively. Most times you can really feel that traction grabbing as you drive out of your bog. A great form of self-recovery is mounting an electric winch to the front of your four-wheel drive. Now, it will require a specific bull bar to mount that. It has an incredibly strong motor and really nice low gears to pull you out of all sorts of different situations. Now, one of the first safety precautions I'd recommend doing is actually weighing both the vehicle and the trailer fully laden before you even head away on your trip. That'll tell you the gross combined mass of your whole rig, and that information is really handy in a recovery situation. So the first step when you're winching is to pop on your recovery gloves. The next step is to attach your winch controller and then flick your winch into free spool mode, and that allows you to simply pull the cable out. Next up, you need a good solid recovery point. So make sure you choose a tree that isn't completely rotten, and in some areas there may not even be an adequate recovery point, and in that case you need to use what we call a ground anchor, and that is often actually burying a spare tyre beneath the surface of an area like sand and then winching off that. Once you've found your anchor point, you need to put the tree trunk protector around that. We don't just wrap the cable around it, because that will simply ring bark the tree and kill it. Now, there are two basic types of recovery with a winch. One is a single line pull, where we simply attach that cable to the tree trunk protector, often through a shackle, and then pull it in that one straight line. And that is the quickest and most simple. But when you're towing a trailer, just consider you're often towing a lot of extra weight, so keep that in mind. So in this case, I'm actually going to do what's called a double line pull. Now, we use what's essentially a pulley, which is also called a snatch block, and we run the cable through the snatch block and actually back to the vehicle itself. Now, what that does is it actually halves the weight on the winch, so it's doing things far easier than it would have with a single line pull. So really recommended when you're towing. Whenever you're winching with a steel winch cable, you want to make sure that you put an air brake or a cable dampener in the center third of that cable, because if anything breaks, that keeps that cable at a nice low height. Now it's just about time to winch. Firstly, you've got to make sure that there are no bystanders anywhere nearby, just in case something goes wrong with the recovery. Next, you want to get into your vehicle, and you actually want to start that vehicle. You see, your winch is actually powered by your starter battery, which is powered by your alternator. So make sure your vehicle is running the entire time to charge that battery. Now that it's time to winch, you need to select drive in your vehicle, or first gear low range, because you want to provide that winch every assistance, and that includes all four wheels driving in your vehicle. And that also goes for any traction aids that you've got in your vehicle. So once it's time to winch, you yell out all clear to let everyone know, and then you yell out winching. Now the next step is that you want to simultaneously activate the winch and your accelerator at the same time, being very careful not to actually outdrive your winch, because you want the winch to be doing the majority of the work.